Hello, Dazzle! Thanks for coming and hanging out with me today. I'm glad you're here. So, what are my thoughts on early access games? Overall, I am not a huge fan of early access games, and this is mostly because I don't feel that it is being used well, rather than being largely against the practice. My first complaint with these games is when you're still expected to pay full price or more for a game that is not a full and complete game. If you're going to be selling me a game that isn't completed yet, you really should be selling that game at a discounted price. If I'm getting half the product, I should only be expected to pay half the price. This is just what seems fair to me, especially since they are also benefiting from my feedback in the development of their product. And sometimes these games cast exactly the same when they're released as a complete product, and other times they're sold for more money and sometimes for less. There's no standard in how the pricing is approached. But my personal experience has been that the price stays about the same after the game goes out of early access into full release. My biggest complaint is the lack of transparency in this process. They never express their pricing intentions, so that can be included in the purchasing decision. There are those that would argue that paying for a game in early access is how you support those that are creating games when you believe in the company and project. And I agree with this point. And I'm happy to support the right company and the right project. But they also need to keep the price realistic. There is a different expectation for a $60 game and a $5 game for a reason. And we should be getting what we're paying for. So there's also the issue that once I've purchased this game, there's nothing to say that the company will actually complete the game. There's no money back guarantee for completing the game. They're just expecting you to give over your money and accept that they may or may not finish the game. And most games in early access are never completed and land into the pile of abandonware. Since these games have about a 75% chance of failing, it means that more likely than not, you're paying for a game that will never be completed. And this is probably my biggest issue with buying them. Early access games are a landscape of promises and disappointments. There are over 7,000 early access games available on Steam right now. All of them are promising me that they are fun and will be finished. But the truth is that only about a quarter of them will live up to that promise. And it can be difficult to tell which ones will make it. And that means that the statistics say that buying one of these titles will most likely leave me feeling more disappointed than anything else. There's no time frame in which a game has to remove the early access label and transition into a full release title. There are some games that have taken this to a ridiculous extreme. As much as I love 7 Days to Die, you have to admit that it's pretty crazy that it is still labeled as an early access game. At what point do we call bullshit on a game being in early access? I mean, when a game is celebrating its 10-year anniversary and it is still in early access, it feels like there's something wrong. Using the early access label allows a company to put a game on the shelf sooner, but there's a good time and a bad time to actually do this. There needs to be enough of a game to be functional and play well. It needs to show off its potential and declare the promise of what it can become. If a game is put out too soon, it ends up being a bad game because those playing it will not be able to see what it could become. Game developers need to be careful not to use the early access label as an excuse for releasing bad games. They need to take the time that they need to produce enough of the content to demonstrate that there is more to come and what is presented needs to have quality. I don't want games to come out sooner if the developer isn't going to put in effort to make them good. they could choose to focus on creating core content and getting that perfect, then putting that content out for sale. There is always time for DLC content to expand on the game, and I won't complain about this method if that primary core content is complete and good. Want to have a full cooking system? Sure, that sounds like great fun, but it could also be something that is added in a DLC content. Same thing with many other game features that are not essential to gameplay, but do add to and round out the game experience. I'm all for games getting updates and DLC content after they are released. And this is a great way to put out a game and then expand upon a solid foundation to make it into something more. But you really need that solid foundation. That all being said, I'm also not looking for games to be perfect or to offer everything in one game title. There are plenty of really fun games that are worth my money that are also not perfect games. Many things in the Bethesda gaming world fall into this category. They're moody and wonky, but I love them, and I'll probably keep giving them my money. Gaming companies also have to remember that gamers are looking for good gameplay before everything else. Games don't have to present the ultra-real environments in order to keep us playing. Look at Minecraft. There's nothing ultra-realistic about that game, but we keep coming back to it, and that's because the gameplay is just really, really fun. And this means that game designers really need to take the time to figure out what game they're trying to create and stay focused on that. A game in early access should be focused on presenting the core features of that concept. And there seems to be a strange push for games to offer everything in a single title. Because of all of this, I hold an early access game to the same expectations and standard as any other game that I'm playing. At the end of the day, they put that product onto the shelf and they declared that it is ready for sale. And that means that they feel that that core and foundation of that game is ready for play. And if that isn't the case, then it shouldn't be sold. The other major reason for this is that an early access game is supposed to be looking to expand and further develop their game. They do this best when they are in a dialogue with the gamers that are playing their game. When the game is complete, it will be judged by the same standard as every other game. And judging it that way while it is in early access allows the developers the chance to make changes and get things right before they make that switch to the full release. That being said, it doesn't mean that I'm not giving them grace for being an early access game. I understand what I'm playing. I understand that there are things that are not yet working as ideally as they could be. I do keep that perspective when I'm playing it. I don't go into the gaming experience with the same expectations, but I am going to give feedback as if I did. In the end, what helps these game developers the most is the feedback that holds them to the standards of a full release title, because that is the feedback that's going to help them reach the game's full potential. So early access games have a place in the market, and I don't hate them. I'm not a huge fan, and I don't seek them out, but this is mostly because they usually lead me to disappointment, since most of these games are never completed. This label should be limited to the small companies, indie games, and hobby developers. I don't think that there is ever a reason that large gaming companies should be using this approach, as they have the funding and staff to put out their games without it. Well, that's about it for my rambling today. Thanks for coming and spending some time with me. If you liked the video, click on that like button. It really does help. And until we talk again, you guys be sure to take care of yourselves. Bye!